Aboard the Portuguese liner Serpa Pinto, the war's youngest refugees arrive in America to begin life anew. Wanderers upon the face of the earth, they come from Poland, from Czechoslovakia, from Spain, some even from Germany, and all are made welcome. Today, under auspices of the United States Committee for the Care of European Children, they finally reach a haven of safety. The Red Cross meets hungry stomachs with food and fresh milk, a language that any child understands. Yes, after months of an insufficient diet, this to them is truly the promised land.
Now I hear we want to take in 200,000 Syrians, right? And they could be, listen, they could be ISIS. I don't know. Did you ever see a migration like that? And I'll tell you right now, and I'm putting everybody on notice, and hopefully this gets outside of this room, and I guess it will with all these crazy cameras going back there. I'm putting the people on notice that are coming here from Syria as part of this mass migration, that if I win, they're going back. They're going back. I'm telling you, they're going back.
The inclusion of those previous videos serves to exemplify one of the overarching themes of our podcast, that being sharp changes in public opinion on refugee politics. It's no secret the world is currently facing the largest refugee crisis since World War II, with more people displaced internally or across international boundaries than ever before. The conversations surrounding the international community's handling of the mass influx of refugees have been heated and controversial, often bringing into question the efficacy and effectiveness of current international refugee law, founded on the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees. Supranational organizations, notably the European Union, have been subject to intense debates on how to approach refugees in the wake of disastrous global conflicts in Syria and Afghanistan. A renewed increase in ethno-nationalism and right-wing populism has come to dominate European politics, epitomized in France's Front National and Germany's Alternative for Deutschland, as well as Hungary's Fidesz party. In order to understand this tempestuous political climate, our group decided to explore the origins of the modern international framework on refugees, beginning with World War II. World War II holds the special status of being the most destructive conflict in human history, resulting in over 60 million lives lost and forever changing the international world order. Imagery of the war continues to dominate national memories. Dunkirk, Stalingrad, D-Day, Iwo Jima. The most defining aspect of the war was the intentional targeting of civilian non-combatants. This was a consequence of total war, or a war that is unrestricted in terms of the weapons used, the territory or combatants involved, or the objectives pursued, especially one in which the laws of war are disregarded. Total war strategies were employed by all major belligerent nations. Japan's enslavement of conquered populations, the Nazis' mass liquidation of Slavic peoples, British and American bombing campaigns in Europe and the Pacific, and the widespread rape of German women by the Red Army all constitute instances of total war. The scale of the fighting led to an unprecedented number of refugees, many of whom were not spared or given any quarter. For example, the sinking of the German cruise liner MV Wilhelm Gustloff in 1945, as part of Germany's retreat along the Eastern Front, remains the single greatest loss of life at sea. The ship was primarily carrying refugee women and children. The scale of destruction and human suffering in the wake of World War II remains an unparalleled event in human history. Refugees and displaced persons in the immediate post-war era numbered in the millions. The experience of these refugees was a motivating factor behind the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948, Article 14 of which claims everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. This right was expanded upon with the advent of the 1951 Convention relating to the status of refugees. Article 1 of this treaty details the internationally accepted definition of refugee, amended later in the 1967 Protocol. A person who, owing to a well-founded fear of being persecuted for reasons of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group or political opinion, is outside the country of his nationality and is unable or, owing to such fear, is unwilling to avail himself of the protection of that country, or who, not having a nationality and being outside the country of his former habitual residence as a result of such events, is unable or, owing to such fear, is unwilling to return to it. The 1951 Convention remains the cornerstone of international refugee law, as well as forming the basis for the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the world's premier organization for the protection of refugees. The 70s and 80s saw an increase in civil wars and proxy conflicts that led to huge numbers of displaced persons. Notably, these include the Bangladesh Liberation War, the fall of South Vietnam to the Communist North, and the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. The UNHCR was active in the protection of these displaced peoples. Since the end of the Cold War, ethnic conflicts in the Balkans and sub-Saharan Africa have garnered much international attention for their displacement of civilians. However, in recent years, the world's attention has shifted to what some may call the most pressing refugee crisis in recorded history.
The Syrian civil war has become the focus of the refugee debate, mainly for the prevalence of Syrian refugees fleeing to Europe. However, Syria is only one of many states that produces large numbers of refugees. Conflicts and dreadful economic circumstances in Somalia, Eritrea, and the well-known war in Afghanistan have led to massive numbers of displaced persons. Contrary to popular belief, most refugees do not make their way to Europe. Those that do represent a small percentage of the total number of refugees. In reality, though, most refugees of the Syrian civil war have fled to Turkey. In March 2016, Turkey and the European Union adopted an agreement aimed at curbing the flow of refugees into mainland Europe. Known as the EU-Turkey Statement, this agreement was met with much controversy among civil society groups, claiming it represented the EU's negligence towards accepting refugees. The focal point of the European refugee crisis is the Western Balkans route, beginning in Greece and going up through the Balkans into Hungary, an EU state. Hungary and Croatia have adopted strict and inhumane policies to deter refugees. These include beatings, horrible camp conditions, and the infamous Hungarian border fence. We've asked Frank Gigo, a professor of pluralist studies at King Zsigmond University in Budapest, Hungary, to elaborate on Hungary's response to the influx of refugees. Can you tell us more about the Hungarian policy towards refugees at the moment?
Okay, well, the Hungarian government, guys, is claiming that it's respecting the Geneva Convention on refugees in the 1950s. But they're trying to follow the letter of the law. What they're doing is doing what they can to discourage refugees from showing up on the Hungarian border at all. For example, you may recall from last year, between Hungary and Serbia, in this sort of international no man's land, is where the Hungarian government set up these basically containment centers for anyone trying to claim refugee status in the country. And while their claims are being processed, which can take several weeks, if not longer, the claimants are basically locked in these barbed wire zones. And there's some concern, quite a good deal of concern from the European Union, for example, from human rights organizations, that this is actually detention. It's not a waiting zone, it's a detention zone, which would be a violation of the rights of applicants. Another thing that's happening is we just had a national election here about a month ago, and part of the campaign was to scare people into believing that there would be another wave of refugees coming to flood Hungary and dilute Hungarian culture and foreign culture. So what you saw was very large posters with pictures of hundreds of refugees walking down a winding road and a big stop sign superimposed on the picture. The odd thing about the picture is that the very same image was used in the Brexit campaign by the pro-Brexit forces. So I would say in Hungary those are the two main things going on. It's treatment of the refugees, which gives Hungary a reputation, bad reputation among refugees, so they would avoid the country, and a public campaign to spread a kind of fear of refugees in society.
So, with all that said, how do you think all those influences from, I guess you could call it Hungarian media, have influenced popular opinion on the refugee crisis?
Hungarian public opinion was never terribly welcoming of difference. So any measurements of the acceptance of foreigners, or the Roma, or Jews, Hungary never scored as a very open society. But what you've seen since these campaigns have been underway is that this kind of fear of strangers, this kind of xenophobia has gone even higher. And the last time I saw some of these results, Hungarians were among the most xenophobic people in Europe. The strange thing being, there are no refugees here. There are hardly any refugees in Hungary. So it's truly a fear of the unknown. Hungarians don't know refugees per se.
Following the American-led intervention against the Islamic State, Islamic terrorists retaliated severely. The 2015 Paris and 2016 Brussels attacks were carried out by extremists bent on retribution for the coalition's involvement in curbing the Islamic State's control in Syria and Iraq. These attacks reinvigorated discourse on the admittance of refugees into the European Union. Perhaps the most significant event to stem from this discourse was the resurgence of nationalist and populist sentiments throughout the European Union, but most noteworthy, Germany, France, and the United Kingdom. The UK's withdrawal of its EU membership, known as the Brexit campaign, was deeply rooted in anti-refugee attitudes. France's 2017 presidential election saw a fierce contest between the center-left Emmanuel Macron and his En Marche movement pitted against Marine Le Pen, the leader of the populist Front National. Although Macron won by a significant margin, the presence of Le Pen's movement signified a prevailing attitude of nationalism in the mindset of French voters.
Hungary's recent parliamentary elections resulted in Prime Minister Viktor Orbán's Fidesz party maintaining a significant grasp within the electorate. Fidesz executed a lengthy propaganda campaign heavily based upon the idea that refugees are inherently incompatible with Hungarian culture. While populist movements in the core EU countries never gained notable majorities, Hungary is a special case. Fidesz has dominated Hungarian politics for close to a decade. These movements bring into question the future of European politics, indeed the future of the European Union itself. It is our group's opinion that a nationalist Europe is a fractured Europe. The lessons of World War II continue to permeate the European mindset. However, the advent of the Syrian refugee crisis has challenged this framework. However, such conversations often neglect one crucial fact. It is not Europeans who are at risk in the short term, but refugees, whose names and faces are often lost in the heat of the political debate. Refugees are simply people trying to live their lives without the fear of persecution and death. They are not political tools to be used by either side.